The exciting conclusion to the 2020 NFL Combine is officially in the books. Next step, free agency and the draft. Today we view things a little differently as we gain some insight straight from the field as to how star athletes make the transition moving to the next level. Also, you may have wondered, who is going to retire next year? Don't worry, we'll tell you, here on Beyond the Blitz. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, ladies and gentlemen. Blitz Crew back at it as always. Brendan Wells, Justin Rogers, very special guest today. We have former center for the Jacksonville Jaguars and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, John Wade. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on very much. You are owner right now of Bob Wade Subaru up in Harrisonburg right now, correct?
Yes, sir. Yep, Bob Wade Subaru and Bob Wade Lincoln.
So our first segment today, we usually have headliners, but we're going to switch it up a little bit as our segment today is going to be From the Field. It's very similar to headliners as we have a couple of bullets marked down, and we're just going to kind of discuss with our guests for a little bit. So the idea of this is to gain some insight of what playing in the NFL is actually like and what the transition from moving from team to team may actually be like as well from an NFL player himself. So we are now at the beginning of the 2020 NFL offseason. My question for you, John, is what is the transition like from playing in the postseason to waiting for next season?
Well, first you want to get to the postseason, so that's the first goal. And so if you don't happen to make it to the postseason, you get at least 4 extra weeks, or technically, I guess 5 extra weeks to start your off season. So it's nice for your body, but bad for your, because that's the reason you're there is to try to make the playoffs and eventually, hopefully bring home a Super Bowl. But whenever your season ends, whether it be in January, February if you made it to the Super Bowl, or last week of December, usually guys take off anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, depending on their age and their body ailments. Because a 16-game season or 17 weeks with 16 actual game season is a long time, and you need some time to recover. But everybody's a little bit different. I mean, some guys take off 2 weeks. It just depends on your workout regimen. So then you spend time with family, friends, do some traveling, whatever your interests are. From off the field, you've been together since end of July. Grinding with one off week, and depending on how you are in that season is how much time you get off in that week, meaning wins and losses, your organization, your coach. So you spend a lot of time together, and you just need to get away and relax mentally and physically before you start thinking about the following season.
So you played for the Jaguars in the AFC Championship game, if I remember correct?
Correct.
And then you went from free agency to the Buccaneers the year after they won the Super Bowl. Isn't that correct as
Yes.
well? So what was that like going to a team that just won the Super Bowl? What was the environment like, and what were the players' attitudes?
Well, they were obviously riding, on a high, winning it all. That's what you're there to do. But there's 32 teams trying to do that every year, and obviously a difficult task. And even if you have a super talented team, so it was a jovial locker room, if you will. They just won the Super Bowl. They're the world champs, and obviously then you get refocused in the spring and summertime and try to make another run at it. Me coming in as a free agent, it was myself and one other offensive lineman. Pretty much the rest of the team was the same, returning starters. So as happy as I was to get that call from John Gruden at the time being the head coach, to come visit with them in free agency, the Super Bowl champs. It was also, on the inside, I was saying, I don't want to be the reason we don't get back to the playoffs, the reason we don't go to the Super Bowl. So, not that I was really down on myself, but it's just, I think it's a natural feeling. You're going to a team, a veteran team that just came off a Super Bowl win. So, it was a little, added pressure, I guess, not that they put on, but, that I think I put on myself internally, that, hey, I want to go out here and perform with these guys that just, brought home a ring.
A lot of people talk about John Gruden as a coach of the Raiders now. What was John Gruden like as a coach coming from a player who he was coaching?
Well, every coach is different. I was with Tom Coughlin for 5 years, and then, going to Gruden, his style was completely different. Both coaches have Super Bowl rings, so, it doesn't matter what your style is. You just got to get your style across to the players. People say player friendly. I don't know what it depends on your age in the NFL. I think what player friendly means to you, as far as I mean, when I say that, I mean, you do a lot of contact with maybe a younger group further into the season, where if you had an older group of guys, you don't do quite as much full contact, full pad type work. You just do a lot of speed work, and you're working on your timing and your game plan scheme. And I think a lot of teams have gone that direction, more these days. Not beating on each other as much during the weeks, but both styles have won championships, for a lot of years. So Gruden was a guy that he wanted more speed, less. Like if we were winning and everything, he'd take the pads off of you, and we still run a ton of plays, and he wanted speed, but we wouldn't be banging into each other as much during the week. His offensive scheme was probably a little, well, not probably, it was a lot more complicated than what we ran in Jacksonville. Meaning, just had a lot of shifts and multiple calls in the huddle, and he wanted to be in the perfect scenario on every play if he could.
You talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, they were coming into their 4th ever season in the NFL when you got drafted to them. So with teams that have just been moved, like the Raiders are being moved to Las Vegas, being moved to a very new space, what was that like to be on a team that it was just only a couple years removed from being in a new location?
Well, fortunately for me, they'd already won. I mean, they started in 95, 96, they went to the AFC Championship. So, 97, I can't remember what they did, honestly. But, 98, we go to the playoffs. 99, we're back in the AFC Championship. So it's a packed house. Jacksonville's a big city, but kind of a small town feel. They're big on their college teams there, Georgia, Florida State. My last couple of years there, we weren't winning as much, but the stadium wasn't as packed, and they were more focused on college. On the other hand, I go to Tampa Bay, and I got recognized as a center in the grocery store, which was different for me. So I could see the star receiver, running back, quarterback, but people would say, "Oh, I saw you in the paper. We signed you at center," and I was like, "Wow, okay, yes, you did." It was just a little shocking, a little different. I mean, some of the other cities I know are like that. They're just ate up with their team. They know every person. So, and not that Jacksonville wasn't. I'm not taking anything from those fans. It was just a little bit different. I mean, being a fresh new, team, just a handful of years old.
Yeah.
So going from team to team, you hit free agency multiple times. You're on the market. You play for 3 different teams, including a year with the Raiders. When a player leaves, or when a teammate leaves, or even when a new teammate comes in, what is that like for the teams constantly changing, and then yourself changing environments and always having a different team every year?
As when I was younger, I thought it was a little bit more difficult. Going through college 4.5 years, and knowing pretty much the same group, but people graduate. It's kind of the same concept. In Jacksonville, we had a pretty good group, and then only a few guys left. A group that didn't move too much until the end. But I think by the time I got halfway through, my 5 years in Tampa, you just become conditioned to the business that it's a business move. It's nothing personal. It's just the way it's going to work, and it's going to be you one day that's either, getting sent home to do a different profession or to another team or whatever the case may be. It could have been a front office change. It could have been a coaching change. It could be, you're not performing anymore, which, it ultimately is going to happen to everybody, I guess, except for like Brady and Brees. But, they say, but, they're one of the few, special elite ones that are still performing highly, at 20 years into the league.
Definitely. Speaking of some of the high caliber quarterbacks, Brady and Brees are pocket style quarterbacks, but nowadays we're seeing a new type of quarterback such as Lamar Jackson, who just won MVP completely with his legs. So how have offensive schemes changed from when you played in the NFL to now, and how does that affect an offensive line's blocking scheme?
Well, the running quarterbacks is a great thing because they can, create and extend plays. Obviously, the ones with premier speed like Lamar, like Michael Vick's, there were, the few, RG3 had that, obviously got injured, but, as an offensive line, you don't know where they are, and they're so fast and quick, and they might have avoided one thing, but you might think they're, to your right side, and all of a sudden they're back on your left side, and maybe not as a center as much, but, I know that's not great for the tackles. They're out there blocking, the most talented guy on the field, being, the left or right defensive end. Those are typically, the freakish athletes, and, if the guy, if you think he's back in the pocket, then all of a sudden he rolls out to, if you're the left tackle, he rolls out to your right. I mean, what are you going to do? You don't know. You don't have eyes in the back of your head. Those guys are usually fast enough, and they can, create for their offensive lineman. But I think as a lineman, that part could be a little bit difficult at times. But I think the talents that these guys bring, with the premier speed and agility, outweighs any negative, from the offensive line perspective. Let's put it that way.
Definitely. So you spent some time in IR, right? You were injured a couple of different times in the season. So we have players like Ben Roethlisberger who are coming back next season, an early candidate for Comeback Player of the Year award. But what do NFL players do to prepare themselves during and after an injury to come back and still compete at that high level?
I mean, I really think it depends on your injury. I went through a knee injury, which has been my worst. The first time I was on IR, it was a broken foot multiple times. And there's not really much rehab for that. I mean, it was just, I had a surgery and it kind of, healed up and, move on from there. On the knee or if you had a shoulder, elbow, stuff like that, you have to rehab pretty hard for, 9 to 10 months. Sometimes people make it back sooner, and then you get the structure in your muscles back, right? But you have to get your fast twitch muscles back, which is probably the hardest thing, especially for a skill position. Shuffling around at center on the offensive line is not like playing corner or DB or a running back. So, depending on what your injury, Ben's case, his is obviously on his throwing elbow. Big deal. Huge deal for that matter. He's not a young guy anymore. He's been through so many injuries that are undocumented, and, he's a tough dude. And if he wants to play, I'm sure he'll be fine. And, hey, let's be honest, if he's at 85, 90% with his throwing arm, it's probably good enough. He's smart enough to make all the throws and plays.
Still a dangerous weapon.
Yeah.
We talked about physically when it comes to injuries, but what was it like for you emotionally, mentally during that season? Also, how do your teammates come around you while you were injured? What did it feel like for you?
The teammates are great. It's not, but unfortunately, they still have a job to do. It's a very regimented, long days. Some people have the thought that you just play on Sunday. I mean, it's a job. Playing on Sundays, the payoff for that job. You have some couple 12-hour days, on the prep days for the week, and a few more, not quite as long as that, but. So you do get to see guys, but you're in there rehabbing usually like when they're in meetings and stuff like that, and depending on your team and situation, sometimes you might be around at practice, traveling, stuff like that. Like Ben, just as we mentioned him, he's got the headset on, he's talking to the guys on the field, telling them what he sees, trying to help out and coach them up. As far as yourself, I mean that's to each individual. When I hurt my knee, now that was a pretty bad knee injury, and I questioned after the surgery. The surgery went great, but I questioned myself at times during rehab. I would go, am I going to be able to come back? Am I going to be able to play at that level again? Go out there and compete, and it all worked out. I was able to, but some guys it doesn't happen, and It sometimes it's the surgeon, sometimes it's the rehab, sometimes there's a million factors. I mean, look at Alex Smith. Unfortunately, he had a terrible break, but it shouldn't have happened the way. I mean, he shouldn't be where he is. I mean, he just happened to get an infection, and he almost lost a leg. So you never know what can happen.
And then you have players like Ryan Shazier who are still employed by the Steelers because they want to pay off the rest of his.
Right, but look what he's done. How many people have had that kind of injury and then come back and be able to do. Walk again on his own, doing box jumps. I saw a video of him doing it. If he ever gets on the field again, who knows? But the fact that he's going to be able to walk on his own power for the rest of his life, that's impressive. And, impressive to the doctors and the training staff up there in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, from a fan perspective, it seems like when you guys play on Sunday, that's, like you said, the only time we really see you. So it's more, you guys are people too. You're not just NFL players. You're not just stars in the league.
Well, Tuesday's a day off, so most people have a Saturday, Sunday, or Sunday day off for their whatever job you're in. So Tuesday's a day off in the NFL for everybody, unless you're injured, then you have to go in and and see the training staff. But even Tuesday is a day off. If if you're a real pro at your job, you're going to study film and tape, and get prepared for Wednesday, which is Wednesday and Thursdays are long work days. Friday, usually done by 1 or 2, depending. And then Saturdays, pretty light walkthrough and either travel or go home until you hit the hotel in the evening.
So in high school, you had a weight room named after you. In college, you were inducted in the Marshall Athletics Hall of Fame. And with the NFL draft right around the corner, we have a lot of young talent who are about to enter the next transition up in the world of football. So what was that transition like for you from being a star at each level and then constantly having to go to the next level and still have those high expectations of you to compete?
Well, from high school, I mean, I wanted to play ball in college, and I had one opportunity there. And I had more opportunities. I should take that back. I was offered one full scholarship, so that's why I ended up at Marshall because that was a no-brainer for me. Hey, they're going to pay for my school. I'm in. So anyway, and I actually sat the bench for 3 years at Marshall. There was a coaching staff change, and so a new staff came in, gave me an opportunity. They liked me. I started for 2 years. Happened to have a guy named Randy Moss on my team who helped me get probably a lot more looks than I should have, because they were there to see him, but they, obviously since they're there or they're getting the tape, they're gonna, look at the field. So I always thank Randy for getting, a lot more looks, like I said, than I probably would have, if he wasn't there. I didn't even think I was going to get drafted come the day before the draft. I mean, a lot of people had said a lot of things, you're going to go here, you're going to go there, and that was just people talking, in my opinion. So I did end up getting drafted on the second day in the 5th round, and went to Jacksonville. And was, happy I got the phone call, thankful for the opportunity. Went down. There was a third guy. They had the starter, they had the second guy who they just brought in free agency, and I don't even know why they had me there, honestly. So, but the starter had back surgery in the offseason. Mm-hmm. He gets hurt the third day of training camp, never plays another snap of football. Wow. So, I ran the 2s and the 3s all that training camp, made the team. It was a tough training camp, especially going from Huntington, West Virginia weather to Jacksonville, Florida weather, and it was hot that summer. I mean, I think it averaged around 98 real temperature, not including the humidity. And I'm a heavy sweater, so it had a lot of IVs. But anyway, I made the team, I got my opportunity. So for me, it was just, I was thankful to have it, the opportunity to go out there, and then just worked as hard as I could to try to make the team, and then I just kept my head down the whole rest of my career and tried to make the team every year because, except for maybe a handful of guys, maybe not even a handful, your job's on the line every year. You're not guaranteed just because you started last season or you played whatever position, whatever role at the team, you're not guaranteed that for next fall. Even if you won the Super Bowl, they still are looking to, Bill Belichick does it all the time. He plugs and plays different guys that fit in his scheme that other teams have cut or, weren't drafted or whatever, but they end up, flourishing in his scheme because, he knows what he needs, at a certain position. So, I know it kind of went off script there, but, I was just happy to, have the opportunity, and it was fun.
Yeah, Bill's definitely the king of making lesser players look like all-time stars, and then they go somewhere else, and then they just don't play the same. But what you said about Jacksonville always being so hot, because you played almost your entire career in Florida. Mm-hmm. What is that like as an offensive lineman, having to stay at a certain weight and always being just bombarded by pounds and pounds of sweat every day?
Well, it wasn't good for the quarterbacks in my case, because like I said, I was probably the heaviest sweater on the team. But anyway, just eating a lot, pumping a lot of fluids. Like I said, after practices, games, getting a lot of IVs, fluids. Unfortunately, when you're a heavy sweater, you also, you're going to lose so much and you're going to cramp. So cramping's no fun at any school, any sport, any city.
For sure.
Yeah, that's really painful. If nobody's experiencing that, I hope you don't have to. But it's no fun. But you just got to learn how to hydrate. Especially you don't hydrate for a Sunday game on Sunday morning or Saturday night. I mean, you start that on Friday afternoon after the last practice. You really got to get the fluids in you because you can lose anywhere from 10 to 15 pounds during a game, and that's obviously not normal in a 3-hour period.
No. And I remember back when I used to wrestle, I would lose 10 pounds and be concerned, but I'd be fine. So I couldn't imagine what that's like, 20 pounds. So you talked a little bit about training camp. The NFL offseason sees a lot of unique workouts. The Falcons trained with Navy SEALs. David Johnson trains his vertical jump by just leaping out of a pool full strength. And then James Harrison will use every single plate in every single gym in all of Pittsburgh just to work out his push power. What is the most unique workout you had to do in training with the NFL?
Well, the unique stuff kind of started at the end of my career. So a lot of the core subject came up basically when I was starting, I guess, in 06-07. Then I was in Oakland in 08 and 09. And then, some of that came, I was like, core, I don't know what that is. I don't have a core. Or it doesn't show visually anyway. But, a lot of those ball and band work, you mentioned jumping out of the pool. I mean, that's just a freak strength athlete there. I mean, that's impressive, however you get it done. But I mean, we use the ropes, chains. I mean, there were some other methods, but the things that I think they do, since I've left or since I retired, I think it's been, stuff I'm not even aware of, But I know core is a big thing on training, and it makes sense. If your core is strong, your whole body's strong. You can, do things more efficiently as an athlete. So I can't give you a great answer on that, other than that we were doing towards the end, a lot more physio ball work, for a different variety of things.
Yeah. Through the last year, we've already seen a lot of NFL stars such as Luke Kuechly, Eli Manning, and Andrew Luck hang up their cleats for good. What is the adjustment like for players when they retire? Because you came back home to small-town Harrisonburg after being this big star in the league for years and years. What do players do in that other transition phase? Not going to the next level, but just going off the level completely.
I can only speak for myself, and I think it depends on what kind of career you had. Meaning, or what your expectations of yourself were, in playing. If you only made it a year and you were cut, and then you were maybe, on the bubble with a couple teams, and maybe you never saw the field, or if your your career was cut short due to injury. But in my case, I can only speak to that. I didn't think I was gonna get 1 year. I got credit for 12. That 12th year I was on injury reserve. But I didn't think I was going to get there. I didn't think I was going to stay that long. So I thought it was a great run. Great ride. I was just happy to do it. And also, I didn't like watching the tape anymore of myself. Blocks I could make all day long. My first couple years, I could make them, but they looked a lot uglier. And so for me, I knew it was time to move on to the second phase of life. I always planned on coming here and learning the car business, and letting my dad retire. I just took a little 12-year detour, and like I said, so in my case, it was pretty simple. I herniated a disc in my neck, and I didn't want to have that surgery, so I just left that alone. And then, like I said, I was already kind of tired of watching the tape. When you don't like watching what you see on film of yourself, then it's probably the end is near, or it should be now.
Yeah, definitely, I can feel that.
You talked about not wanting to watch tape of yourself after you left the NFL. How much of the NFL did you start watching, and did you watch the NFL at all after you retired?
Oh yeah, I definitely watch it. I watch it every Sunday. I don't sit there and study the game like I used to. I used to have, it started off with VHS, then went to DVD, and then I had my own laptop at the end. That's just how far technology evolved during my career. But I enjoyed watching it as a fan, just where's the ball going. Obviously, I do know some scheme, and that's ingrained in my head forever. But I don't sit there and study, like I used to. So I just enjoy it as a fan and hang out. And if something happens, I don't get too crazy. I know some friends of mine, and they have a whole routine and a seance going on, and the jersey and all that. And I don't go that far. I'm a Redskins fan. All the teams I played for, I hope they do well. But I grew up watching the Skins, being from here, and and the good teams they had in the '80s. So I'd like them to get back there one day, but I don't know if that's a reality anytime soon or not either.
How much did you follow the rest of the league while you were in the league?
Well, it really depended on who. I pretty much followed our division for the most part. Always watch Monday Night Football if you weren't playing, Sunday Night Football if you were home in town. And watching your position and watching other defensive linemen. In my case, at that point, when I watched a game, while I was playing, it was more I was studying the game than I was enjoying it. I did enjoy it, don't get me wrong, but it was more. I know this. I'm going to face this guy in 6 weeks, or. I played this guy 2 weeks ago, and I just was seeing what happened, or knew that guy from wherever. So it's stuff like that. So it was a different perspective.
When you left Jacksonville and when you left Tampa, did you still have conflicts wishing that they would win? Or when you were with them, did you want the Redskins to still win? Were you rooting for certain teams?
No, when I was on that team, I was only focused on that team. Yeah. After we were out, if we went, I went to the playoffs 4 times. But if we're out of the playoffs, when we get up to the Super Bowl, I'd say, I hope so and so wins. But I didn't really care because I wasn't there. That's the goal. So there's only one. There's 31 losers every year in that league. So if you don't bring home the hardware, then you're the loser. Which is it's harsh to say it that way, but that's a fact.
Yeah. So this is just one question I really want to know out of curiosity. Who is the hardest player you ever had to block?
That's a tough one to say, just because every player is good. You're not there if you're just okay. Meaning, whether you're the starter or the number 2 guy. So probably a bunch of guys that I can't even name their name were just as tough. Some of them were notable. The guy named Vince Wilfork from New England, when he was a rookie and even, later in his career, but he was just, a huge man and low to the ground. And I never forget, we had a scheme. We were going to do this against them, and they wanted me to take him one way or the other. And the guards were going to run up here because they were playing the 3-4 instead of the 4-3. So that the guards were going to run right up and grab the backers, and I'm just going to take Vince whichever way That lasted about a quarter and a half, and the coach said, "Are you gonna be able to move him?" I said, "Absolutely not." And I said, "If you want him moved," I was like, "I don't even know if we can move him with a double team. You might want to start, running towards the tackle." I was like, yeah, "That's just a grown man in there." So I mean, there's plenty of others. But he was one of the more notable. I was just like, I cannot move that guy. If he doesn't want to go, I can't force him.
And kind of one last question that I'm curious about before we go to our next segment. Who was your favorite player to play with, or at least the most fun player that you were to play with?
I mean, the name one, the offensive line room, I think, is one of the best rooms in football. So, I mean, we're a pretty close-knit group. We spend a lot of time watching film and stuff together. I mean, if you think about it, it's that one of the, I guess, the offense and defensive line room. But, I mean, the offensive line room, you got to work five together, plus, a tight end at times, where, defensive line's four guys. So, I think, all three places I was, the offensive line group was always a tight-knit group. And, not one in particular, just as a whole, it was a good room. And enjoyed all those guys I worked with.
So the NFL Combine just ended and the draft is right around the corner. So a couple of thoughts about the Combine and the draft. So when you went to the Combine for a little bit, what were the interviews like at the Combine?
Not too bad with the teams. Like the Wonderlic test is not. I don't know what it's worth. I mean, I actually scored well on it, but I don't know that means anything because I don't know if you've ever seen it or not. But the questions are, I don't know how it tests intelligence other than they're putting you in a pressure situation under time. It's not like the questions are that crazy. But as far as the interviews with teams, they were just kind of having a conversation, at least in my day, and I didn't have a ton of interviews. I mean, I probably had, I guess, 8 to 10 maybe. The couple. I guess I was there 2.5 days, 1.5, 2.5. I don't know. It's been a little while since I've been there, but you go around and you walk into rooms and you get shirts and bags and stuff, and you shake some hands. And usually, I mean, I'm sure if you were a potential first rounder, it would have been a much different scenario than what I experienced there. But the whole combine as a whole now, it's not the greatest experience. Let's put it that way. You're getting you're just getting pulled on and prodded by medical staff, and paraded around in front of 500 guys, and your in your short shorts there, walking, getting weighed and measured, and then you got to walk down the middle of this auditorium, and everybody's scribbling on pads. So. It's it's not like oh man, that was the best experience I've ever had. But it's part of the part of life going to the NFL if you want to do that, and it can either help or drop your draft stock. So obviously you want to perform well there, interviews and the physical stuff.
Yeah, for another question we have, so when you went to the Combine, what was the environment like with some of the other guys, specifically the offensive line group that you were with?
Oh, they were awesome. Everybody was experiencing the same thing. It's not like anybody's experienced that before. They might have been told, depending on which university they were from. We were all good. I mean, the offensive line was together, and you go to the doctors together. You run the 40 together. You do the shuttle, the Wonderlic, all that stuff. You do all that in the same time frame. So, you get to talk to guys that normally wouldn't have gotten to talk to from schools across the country. It was just it was kind of like you'd known them for a while actually. I mean, it was a very easy conversation. Nobody was a prima donna or anything like that. Everybody was just, I think everybody's a little bit deer in headlights. I mean, I'm sure it's a little different today. Everything's on TV and the knowledge is out there, I guess, if you will. Back in my day and, the guys before me, I mean, the internet wasn't prevalent. There wasn't, everybody was kind of going into the unknown unless they had a teammate, that had gone before and he came back and told them something. So, I think now guys know what to expect and kind of prepare for where, before you kind of go in like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Especially because nowadays with the way technology's gone, media's probably everywhere, TVs, cameras everywhere, internet on your shoulder. So I imagine it's a lot different today.
No question.
So going off of that, how do you think the NFL Combine has changed in the past 20 years?
Honestly, I don't watch it on TV, so I don't know what I can't, I'm sure you still run the 40 if you choose to run it, and then you do the bench press, and I do the 3-cone drill and the shuttle run, at least and the vertical jump. I'm assuming those are the same, because those are the things you can test, that's not playing football, but it tests, football type moves and strength and your explosiveness. I mean, I get the reason for the combine, but at the same time, I always said that if I was in a scouting situation or be it at any level. I'd take all that into consideration, but I also turn the tape on. Can you play football or can you not?
Definitely.
And you know, running a 40, bench pressing, squatting, all that stuff is part of playing football, but it's not playing the game. So turn the tape on. That's going to be, you know, the best way to evaluate talent, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was one thing that Bruce Arians said this past week, that a guy could run a 4.6 in the combine, but then in his tape he shows that he can run a 4.3. So it doesn't really matter. Like, how much of the combine really plays a factor?
I mean, it drops and raises people's draft stock a lot, but it also, I think that's why you see the first round is not always correct. Most years, I mean, I don't have percentages, but, you know, a lot of first round picks, you know, aren't or don't ever materialize to be what, you know, they're projected to be. You know, you get the words upside, potential. You know, they have, you know, upside or potential to do or become or be this, and some do and some don't. But I think if more emphasis was put on the tape and you know what you do on the field. I mean, like Coach Arians was saying. I mean, that's a guy who's fast on the football field. He might not be fast on the track or in that timed environment right there. But with all the pads on during the game, he can still run away from people. Well, that's what you want. You're trying to score or catch or whatever his position may be. So I always lean towards, hey, go to the tape. If a guy played 30 games in college, study those 30 games. If he played 10 games, study those, whatever it is.
And even then, we see Heisman Trophy winners all the time coming to the NFL and just be complete duds. We saw JaMarcus Russell come in, big star, nothing. One of the biggest busts in NFL history.
I played with him in Oakland, and good guy.
I'm sure he was.
Just never, couldn't make the throws. I mean, he could throw the ball through the wall, but he just couldn't make the throws he needed on the field. So, yeah, I mean, stuff like that happens all the time, and I often wonder, you got billion-dollar organizations, and, why wouldn't they spend more emphasis on that, first-round investment on a lot more tape time? And not that they don't. I know they got, departments full of people and studying, and those guys grind. Believe me, they spend hours and hours in there, because they want to keep their job. They want to do well, too. But it just seems like, the higher-round picks don't work out more often than not.
Yeah.
And so we have guys like Chase Young, the edge rusher for Ohio State, skip some of the position drills. Why do you think that some players skip the position drills or just skip the combine altogether?
Well, in some cases, when your talent is, high enough, you're a premier talent, as I would say, they can basically say that. Go to the tape. It's kind of I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they were advised by their agent, whoever or agency, whoever they signed up with. Hey, you don't need to do this. You can only hurt yourself. You can't improve your draft stock. Mm-hmm. You're already projected top 5, number 1, whatever that is. If you went out there and you ran a bad 40, or you jumped, you ran your vertical wasn't what everybody's said it was in the past. That's only going to hurt you, and it doesn't mean you still won't be drafted there. But it's just one more reason for a team to knock you and not draft you there, or say, oh well, you only ran a you ran a 4.8 when everybody else says you're a 4.59 guy. What happened?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of one of the reasons some of these top guys choose not to.
And what is the biggest difference between working out at the combine and working out your pro day?
I think just the anxiety of it, at least for me. I mean, and maybe not these days. Like I said, there's a lot more known about what's expected of you and what you're going to do at the combine. But, in your pro day, it's your home environment. You're around your coaches and staff. People coming to you. It's just more familiar. You've already been to the combine. So, if that was bad, like mine, I had a bad combine as far as, 40 time. Bench wasn't great. It still wasn't great. It was better. I ran a better 40, at my pro day, and my bench was a little better, but that was a little weak. But I'd say environment, just, being at home. It's kind of like sleeping in your own bed versus, being elsewhere. You just have, comfort. It's a little bit more comfortable.
So after the combine and after your pro day and everything, what was the process like meeting with teams? And did you have any idea that you would get drafted at all, or who you get drafted to?
No. As far as no more meeting with teams for me, but I mean I was going to be a late first day, second day guy. The other guys, first round guys definitely have a lot more activity, a lot more meetings. Whether a team comes to them, they go to the team, whatever the team decides. In my case, none, and I had no idea as far as drafting. Now, the Jaguars called me in the 4th round. They didn't take me. But then I was still there in the 5th round, so they took me in the 5th. So that was about all I knew. So I was on the phone, and then no.
That's awesome.
So anyway, but everybody's experience is a little bit different. I mean, and like I said, this has been a long time now. Over 20 years. So I don't know if things are a little different on information being given. Now, and I say that back. Now, Peyton Manning was my draft year. I think Peyton knew he was going first to the Colts. Before they got on TV and said it.
I'd say so.
And that's very interesting. I've never heard of players being called the round before and not getting drafted by them and then getting called again.
Well, I guess they decided there was a guy that played D-line for another school that they took that they wanted more than me.
They probably had some intel that he was going to go before and wanted him then.
Well, right, that somebody else was going to take him and they wanted to take a chance on him. You know, who knows? Those war rooms are exhausting. I haven't sat in it during, but I hear or have heard plenty of stories. And guys that leading up to the draft have spent, guys at teams have spent, countless hours, 2-3 hours a night sleeping at the office. I mean, they're exhausted, worn out. Like I said, they're trying to make the right decision, and there's always, it's never a unanimous decision. Oh yeah, we're going to take this guy, and this guy. There's always somebody saying something different, whether it be ownership, personnel, GM. All those factors got to come together and then make a decision. So, from the staff perspective, it's a tough run up to the draft, up to and through the draft.
You said you got drafted day 2. What was that night like for you, or that day, depending on when you got drafted?
Well, I didn't really expect to be on day 1, so I watched until Randy got drafted, and he slid in the first that year. So it took a little longer than I expected, and I turned it off after that. I didn't even because I really didn't believe I was going that day. So really wasn't worried about it. When I say we're not worried, I just didn't. I said we'll see what happens tomorrow, and so that was it. 5th round came, and that got the call. Well, I got the call in the 4th and the 5th, and so I had to wait 148 spots, and they took me. So.
And finally, what was it like to finally put on an NFL jersey as a Jacksonville Jaguar?
It was awesome. To make the team, you go through the first cut, second cut. I mean, I think that day was the hardest. There was a Sunday. I think they do it before Sunday now, but it used to be Sunday was the final cut, I think, by 4 o'clock. So if you don't get a phone call before 4 o'clock, you've made the team. So just kind of waiting around all day, wondering. So that day was definitely a long day, because I'd already been through training camp and put all the work in, and was just hoping it was good enough to make it.
So moving on now to old-fashioned Beyond the Blitz style. Justin, you want to tell me what time it is?
What time is it, Brandon?
It's time for way too early predictions.
So today we're going to go through which players we think may retire after the 2020 season. So these are players who have pretty much lived up to their prime. They're past it. As you said earlier, they may no longer like what they see on the film. So we're going to go through and see who may retire after next season. Justin, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll start you off. I'll start you off with a guy who just signed with the Seattle Seahawks and Greg Olsen. I think I was surprised that he signed with another team. He's getting up there in age, and you definitely, when you see guys who are starting to get injured more and are starting to get hit by the injury plague, you wonder whether for them it's worth it to be playing in the NFL and to be undergoing those physical conditions, as you said, over the offseason and during the season as well. So I think it could be one of those situations where he wins a Super Bowl with the Seahawks and retires. I can definitely see it because the Seahawks are a pretty good team going into this 2020 season.
Yeah, he also only signed a 1-year contract deal. He's getting up there in age. I mean, he may be a Hall of Famer, may not, but if he goes on to win a Super Bowl with Seattle, I could definitely see it. So my player I want to talk about first is, I've talked about him a little bit earlier, how I don't think he's going to get signed by the start of next season, but again, we'll see what happens, and that's Ndamukong Suh. He's getting up there in age. He's a free agent now. I don't think the Bucs are going to re-sign him simply because he wants way too much money. They have Shaquille Barrett they need to re-sign. He's going to hit free agency. No one's going to want to give him the money he's looking for until about halfway through the season. I think someone who is contending is going to sign him. He's going to be a 1-year player, and then afterwards, no one's going to want to re-sign him after the 1-year contract deal, and he's just going to retire. Call it a career. It was a good career through all the ups and downs old-fashioned Ndamukong Suh had. Good career and all, and he's going to retire after next year.
I will comment on Suh. I did play against him when he was first out, and that's another full-grown man. Who I also should have put in, in the earlier segment with Will Folk. He was one of the guys that came out. I mean, I felt like when I started playing, the guys were 320-ish. And then they went to the 350, 360 range, but because still move, side to side, and they weren't a bad looking 350, 360, if you can believe that. And Suh was one of those. So as far as what he does, you have no idea. But I mean, when he wants to move you, he can move you. I don't know. I mean, I could, bring up the quarterback situation. I think it depends on, wherever Brady signs. I know he says he wants to play until he's 45, and barring injury, I would assume he would. But I really think Drew Brees might be done after this one. And not because he can't still play. 21 or 20 years, that's a great run. He's got kids growing up. He's active in their lives. Not that Tom's not. But I think he might be a little closer than Brady, but we'll see what happens. Who knows? They might both play until they're 45. Maybe they want Brady to catch him in the yard race. So, I think he's got him by 3,000 or 4,000 yards. So, if he left Brady on the field one more season, he could lose the all-time passing leader. So that's a pretty nice one to have.
Could be a very silent rivalry between the two. Passive aggressive. You're like, quit. No, you quit.
Another guy that I have is Jimmy Graham, another tight end. I think a theme that I have for these guys are injuries. I think Jimmy Graham goes through a lot of injuries and a lot of inconsistencies. And I think for Greg Olsen, it would come down to injuries. For Jimmy Graham, it comes down to who's going to sign him? Will there be any team that actually wants to sign Jimmy Graham after the seasons that he had in Green Bay? I think Green Bay is kind of tired of Jimmy Graham. A lot of the teams are, because they have this high expectation that he's going to play really well, and then he just falls off. So Jimmy Graham would be one of the guys I would say, maybe not 2020, but 2021 definitely, but you could see him retire this upcoming offseason.
Who I think is going to retire soon is LaShawn McCoy. He has one more year left in him. He is probably not going to play for the Chiefs next season. I predict he may go back to Philly, finish his career one more year in Philadelphia, and then call it quits, because he hasn't produced on a mass level. He had one good year in Buffalo, but other than that, he hasn't been the top-tier caliber running back he was when he was in Philly. So maybe he'll have a good season next year if he goes there and plays that route, but after that, I think he's done.
And then you go back to another quarterback. See the center quarterback relationship here. None of these guys actually, but Ryan Fitzpatrick's not getting any younger.
Yeah.
He's had ups and down careers. I mean, he's looked like a superstar, all-pro, perennial all-pro at times, and then not so much other times. He had the Fitz magic going on a couple of years ago, and then so I don't know. Just because he's getting up in age, and I think he's been relatively healthy. He had a few injuries, but I think he's 37 this year.
He's getting up there.
Or 38, somewhere in that range. So hey, and he's had a pretty good run at it. And being a backup, maybe I'm wrong, because being a backup in the NFL, if you got a healthy guy in front of you, it's not a bad way to make a living, other than, as a competitor, you want to be on the field.
Right.
But, it's better than, selling cars for a living. I can monetarily, I can tell you that.
Man, John, stealing my pick, man.
I read your mind.
You read my mind, John. Well, another guy I could definitely talk about is another offensive lineman, Andrew Whitworth. A guy who was drafted by the Bengals, played for the Rams, went with the Rams on that Super Bowl run. A part of that NFC Championship winning team for the Rams, especially with Todd Gurley in the backfield, he really helped with that. But he's getting up there in age. I think the Rams are at a spot right now where they could draft a tackle. I mean, this upcoming draft does have a lot of good tackles. And they have a good amount of cap space where they could get a guy in free agency who can at least come in and compete for a job. Andrew Whitworth, I'm sure he could still play in the NFL, but I think just for him right now, it might be the best to retire.
So my final player I want to talk about, staying with the running backs, old man walking or running in this case, Frank Gore. Justin, we were having a conversation earlier. You think he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't quite agree on the same wavelength. I do think he's a Hall of Famer, but in that aspect, I'm not sure. But he's still a great player, all-time great for sure, especially when it comes to his statistics. Just similar to LaShawn McCoy, he's getting up there in age. He's not playing at the same level he used to. He's still a very consistent and trustworthy running back. You can rely on him in big situations, but at the end of the day, he's made his money. He's made his dues. Might as well just hang up the cleats and call it quits if I were Frank.
Hey, Frank, he's a stud. I mean, to play running back at the level he's played at, for all the years, and to train the way he has in the off season there, to stay at that level, and fought through injuries too. I mean, he's an impressive guy to watch live. If you ever have the opportunity, or maybe this year for whatever reason, you should take it. And as far as I had to comment on the first ballot Hall of Fame, I don't know what they're going to vote on. I mean, I think he should be, but I don't know if he will be. His stats say yes. What is he, third now, all time, I think, right? Didn't he get that spot last year, or he's going to get it this year?
Yeah.
So, you can't – that's a lot of yards in that league. So I'm going to finish off with two because I'm the guest. So I just want to stay with the running back theme, and Adrian Peterson, another guy that's, a stud, and or maybe he's number 3, and Gore, I don't know, somewhere in there. I mean, obviously Walter's number 1, and then I can't remember. But regardless, he's up there as well, and, had a great career, and is still, played at a high level last year. I don't know if he's, what his play time's going to be as far as, the amount of touches he'll get. But I don't know that anybody runs the ball harder than Adrian Peterson. I mean, maybe Frank Gore, maybe they should be on the same team together, and it's just going to be, you're going to be physically black and blue after the game. They might only have 50 yards, but you're going to know you played them. So, I'm not sure if he'll retire or not because I think he just has too much drive, without injury. But, he's definitely getting up there in age and playing running back, taking a lot of shots. And then my second guy, I got to go with Witten if he even gets on the team this year, which he's expressed that he wants to be on the team. I don't know if his team, being the Cowboys, or anybody else picks him up. But if he does indeed make a roster, I think this would probably be his final season.
I can't believe we're still talking about Witten at this point. Coming out of retirement, work for a broadcasting crew, come back out of retirement, and you're crazy.
Right.
And to comment on Frank Gore and Adrian Peterson, Frank Gore is number 3 all-time in rushing yards, and Adrian Peterson is number 5.
All right. How far are they apart?
They are, according to Pro Football Reference, they are about 1,000 yards apart.
Ooh. Well, it depends on if they want to hand him the rock. He could probably get 1,000 yards. I just don't know if they're going to give it to him.
And that's hard for Adrian Peterson to really get the rock in Washington because you have Darius Geis there, who is a talented running back, just keeps getting hurt. And then they drafted Bryce Love last year, and then you have Chris Thompson, who they signed to a deal a couple years ago. He's on a contract year, so he's going to want to perform too. So there's just a lot of guys in that backfield. It's going to be hard for him to get some touches, but it's Adrian Peterson. He's going to get some touches.
Hey, well, they got him for good money, so if they're going to pay him, they should. I mean, they don't have to give him a 1,000-yard season, but I definitely think he has some relevance left. If they want to play, hard-nosed downhill football.
So that's all the time we have for you here today. We've run through everything we've wanted to talk about. Thank you very much, John, for coming out. You had a lot of really good things to say, a lot of good insight.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, guys. I really appreciate it, and best of luck in the future on your show.
Thank you very much, man. Appreciate it. Blitz Crew, Brandon Wells, Justin Rogers. Tune in next Friday for another episode of Beyond the Blitz. If you haven't already, go follow our Twitter page. That's Beyond_Blitz. We post content every single day, as well as guest profiles and sneak peeks for upcoming episodes. Also, we are now on Apple Podcasts, so we're now on 2 platforms, and we will continue to try to expand to more and more platforms as we continue. Thank you very much for listening, and of course, stay purple. This has been Beyond the Blitz.